Hey, how's everyone doing today? My name's Cal Dermody. I'm an FAA registered UAV and drone operator. I do commercial interior and exterior drone tours. With drones becoming more and more popular every day, the amount of harm that can be caused with them is exponentially growing. Due to these harmful events, a new piece of legislation is hitting the shelves in 2023 called Remote ID. If you're not familiar with this, let me fill you in with some of the key terms. In the simplest of terms, a drone is an unmanned aerial vehicle not designed, manufactured, modified, or to be controlled directly by a person from within or on the aerial vehicle. Now, this definition leaves a lot of gray area. Anything that's flying through the air that is not directly controlled by a person on board is considered a drone. So here's an example of one. You control it by a controller, it flies through the air, you put the props on, you are elsewhere while it flies and does its own thing, as all of these other guys do as well. These are all drones. This also means that any RC planes or RC Star Wars toys, anything that is remote controlled by a person on the ground and flies through the air, whether it be a wing, a quadcopter, or anything, is considered a UAV or a drone. They abide by the same legislation. And as technology has progressed, all these drones have gotten better and better. This can fly tens of miles away without you seeing it. The problem with that is that people aren't being held accountable for the wrong things that they do, and the FAA is not very happy about it. Remote ID stands for Remote Identification. It's basically like a license plate for your drone. Remote ID is a signal that the drone will output that is constantly telling the location of the drone, the speed of the drone, the operator of the drone, and the location of the operator of the drone. This is put in place so that people can hold the people who are doing wrong things with drones accountable. Similar to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which it basically is, it transmits that signal short-range proximity. So it's not like a phone where it's going to connect up to a satellite and then transmit that signal in a broad area that's massive. It's going to be just transmitting within the area of that drone, so that if somebody in that area is causing problems, then you can find them just in that area. As well as a unique identifier, an emergency status symbol, as well as a timestamp are all included in this so that you can properly investigate and figure out who's causing the problems. Now, I went to the FAA's website and I took this directly from their website on why we need remote ID, and what they quote said was, "Remote ID helps the FAA, law enforcement, and other federal agencies find the control station when a drone appears to be flying in an unsafe manner or where it is not allowed to fly. Remote ID also lays the foundation of the safety and security groundworks needed for more complex drone operations." In short, the FAA just wants to hold people accountable for doing wrong things, which, in a sense, they're correct. If you have this transmitting off of your drone, and at all times this is telling who I am, it is going to 100% stop people from doing bad things. It's definitely going to make there be a reason to not do something bad, because as of right now, there's no repercussion for doing something wrong. All that can happen is if the FAA finds a video of you doing it, then you get held accountable. But without remote ID or anything implemented that does such an activity, such as tracking, you can't figure that out. So there's been plenty of regulations put in place to prevent people from doing bad stuff with drones, but there's never been anything to hold people accountable for what they do. And that's why remote ID is special, because before there'd be rules that say, don't do this and don't do that. But if there's nothing that gets you in trouble for doing that, then nobody's going to abide by those. So I think that's what the main purpose of remote ID is to allow people to be held accountable. To start with some of the issues that the FAA faces, there's two distinctions on how you can fly a drone. You can fly it commercially or you can fly it recreationally. In order to fly it commercially, you must be flying with a Part 107 license. Now, in order to fly recreationally, you must be flying only with the intent of for fun. So if you're going up and you're taking photos, your intent all of a sudden is no longer for fun. Your intent is to get photos. Therefore, you have to have your Part 107 to be flying commercially. If you go up and you just want to go for fun, then you can fly under your recreational license. Now, the issue is that in order to get your Part 107, you have to go through a course where you learn lots of rules, and it teaches you how to fly legally. Not to fly over people in certain situations, not to fly over cars in certain situations, not to fly here, not to fly there, airspace rules, all the laws that you need to abide by while you're flying a drone. The issue is that people will fly in a commercial manner without knowing the rules to fly commercially because they don't have their Part 107, and they're flying what they think is recreationally, but it's actually commercially. So I think the main point of this remote ID is to prevent those people from doing such activities, because a lot of them are unaware. As I mentioned earlier, It's obvious that there needs to be a regulation to hold some people accountable. I cannot deny that there needs to be something in place to make the community a safer place for people who are around people who are flying drones. And although remote ID does fit this bill, it does still have some drawbacks that I'm concerned about that I think need recognition. For starters, it seems as though there might be a privacy concern. I think it's kind of obvious that there is kind of a big privacy concern. There often seems to be a negative stigma associated with people flying drones. A lot of people in the community will have quote-unquote Karens coming out and yelling at them for flying, thinking they're getting spied on and stuff like that. So it's obvious with this new implication that there's going to be quite a bit more cases where people see a drone and then they go and they take out their app to find it, they go and find it, and then they find the operator, and then they give them heck for doing something they don't want them to do. And I think that's a very valid concern, because if you're flying a drone, and imagine you're doing a commercial gig where you have a drone up in the air, and it's an expensive drone, and then somebody who is completely unbeknownst to the job comes and starts harassing you because they think that they're being spied on, even though that was never the case. Now all of a sudden your drone's in jeopardy, your safety's in jeopardy because there's a person there harassing you, and you basically need to damage control while the damage is ensuing. And I think that's just a big stressful load for drone operators. I think that to allow any person to be able to find this drone operator is a little too personal for the average person to be able to have access to. A case in 2014 shows a woman who assaulted a man while he was flying his drone, and she's facing a year in prison because of it. So there's obviously been some cases where people get harassed by people who dislike them flying drones in a legal manner, and it's only going to get worse with this new implication when people can find the specific drone operator who they think that they're having problems with. In my opinion, a major solution to this might be that they should encrypt where this information goes, because I wouldn't want just every single person getting the access to this app that can show the location of drone operators. I think that they should only have law enforcement or people who are able to enforce laws legally able to access the app. I don't think that it should be accessed by the average person. Another issue with remote ID is its mandatory implication in all drone pilots. Now that is all drone pilots. If you live in Alabama or Georgia or Mississippi or somewhere where there's tons of woods and trees and you want to fly on your private property, nowhere near anyone else, not putting anyone in danger, no one lives near you, there's zero planes flying by, you can't do that unless you are transmitting your location and your drone's location to the public. Now, I understand wanting to have safety implications put in place to keep people safe in the public. I definitely agree with that. But there needs to be a way to allow people to fly drones in private locations without having to broadcast their signal for no reason. Basically, at that point, you have a law that's put in place to keep people safe, but there's no one being kept safe by it. The only thing that's happening is you are losing your safety because of it. Now, obviously, when you're in a rural location and you need to find the drone operator, you are keeping other people safe by giving up your location and safety, which makes some sense. You want to keep other people safe in a public location. But when you're in a private location and you're the only person whose potential safety is being jeopardized, you're now giving up your privacy and your safety to save the safety of no one, because there's no one there who you're flying a drone under or over or conducting anything illegal. You understand what I'm saying? Basically, remote ID needs to only be implemented in public locations, or locations where there is constant activity where this kind of stuff is happening. It doesn't seem as though it is beneficial to implement remote ID in all instances, because there are some instances where it's serving no purpose, but it's actually negating the safety of the operator. So I think those are just some facts to take into consideration. Now, the FAA has a thing called FAA Recognized Identification Areas, where you don't need to fly with remote ID. And I really like this. I think this is really awesome because it allows you to have that freedom in places where you obviously should have it, where you're not posing a threat to anybody and you're not creating a problem. So moving forward with that implication, I'd like to see that where you can like ask to have your backyard added to that, or ask to have an area added to that. Because obviously, if I own property somewhere, I don't want to have to run this unit at all times. Which, and by the way, another concern with these units is that a lot of them weigh a lot. So in order for a drone to fly above people, it has to be beneath 250 grams. These modules that they're getting for you to add to stuff like this that weighs beneath 250 grams makes it weigh above 250 grams. So it's difficult. It's definitely getting the fine details honed out, but there's drawbacks to it. There's good and there's bad, but there's definitely still drawbacks. So is remote ID good? Is it bad? What does this mean? Really nothing. Race Day Quads challenged remote ID in the Supreme Courts. Race Day Quads is a company that produces drone parts, and they lost. They thought that it was an illegal regulation, and they fought it in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld that regulation. So ultimately, it sounds like we're gonna have to start living with remote ID, and if you don't want to, then you're gonna have to get over it.